everyone. I thought today I'd take a few minutes and just quickly talk about how I tune my drums, or how I try to tune my drums. And I have this is obviously not from my Masterworks kit. This is a Ludwig Questlove kit, and it's a very small kit. This is, I believe, a 10 by 7, and then also the floor tom over here is 14 by, no, it's not 14, it's 13 by, I'm not sure, I forget, but I know it's a 13. That's silly of me to forget the size of my drums, but I haven't had this set very long. I had an old Pearl Export that I traded in to get this one brand new, and the main reason I wanted this one is because it actually fits in our car. I can fit everything in the car and go to a gig where I'm playing drums in a car, which I think is fantastic. And that way I don't have to load everything into my huge van. You get better fuel economy in the car, obviously. And, excuse me. Got my coffee over here. And it's just way more convenient, just depending on what type of gig it is. That's not to say I would never take my Masterworks kit out for a gig. It just depends. Like if I'm playing in a small country club or something like this, I'm probably going to use this kit just because it takes up a lot less space. It's easier to set up, and it's actually normally I hate on Ludwig, but that's mainly because of the hardware. A lot of the hardware I've had from Ludwig just tends to break down and strip out. But these drums are actually pretty good. This is actually, I believe these are 7-ply drums. I want to say it's poplar. I don't think it's birch. I want to say it's poplar. And the actual pearl equivalent of this kit, they're only 6-ply drums. So this is actually a little bit better than the pearl equivalent, I think. So I'm going to be using this set this week on a gig, and it really needs tuned. It's been sitting in my garage, and so I'm just going to try to see if I can get this where I want it. Now, a couple things I want to talk about here as far as tuning goes. I always hear a lot of complaints from people that I play with about when you hit a tom, it sounds a certain way and then it resonates flat, kind of like this. So you hear this and it goes boom. Okay, but if you hit it softer, it doesn't really do that as much. So what's happening is when you hit a drum, this is like what happens when you play timpani in an orchestra or a concert band. When you hit this drum, the moment that the stick strikes it, this top head is tightened a little bit more because it's being pressed in. That is the attack. And the attack sound will always be a little bit sharper than what the drums are actually tuned at. So if you have the top and the bottom head tuned at the same pitch so that they resonate with each other, you'll get that because the attack will sound sharp and then the resonance will be at what the drum is actually tuned to. So you run into that problem a lot. And granted, when you're in a band and everything's mixed in together, it's not that big of a deal. However, sometimes you see drummers tuning the bottom head just a little bit tighter than the top to avoid that flat resonance. And I might start doing that myself just to kind of experiment and see what sounds best, because I don't have a lot of processing for my drums. Like for my videos, I've just been using that analog mixer. Now, it's a really good analog mixer. I'm very impressed with the way it sounds, but it's an old Mackie 1604, and a few of the channels don't even work on it, but I don't need all of them. But I don't have any gates or compression or anything like that, so everything's just being mixed raw. And so I need to get the drums to sound absolutely as good as I can. And I mean, you want to do that anyway, whether you've got processing or not, but it's even more important to really hone in on the sound of the drums. So I think what I'm going to do is actually start over on this. And then I'm probably gonna, I'm gonna loosen all these. This was already pretty loose on the bottom here, so I think I could have tuned it up higher. Also, I should mention, this kit came with clear pinstripe, which is not the head I normally use, and it's a little bit thicker head than the coated ambassadors I use on my Masterworks kit. So naturally, they sound a little bit lower as it is. Okay, so I've got everything pretty much flat. So what I'm going to do first is get the bottom head retightened and try to get equal tension across all of the tension rods here. Hopefully I'm not getting out of the camera view. I've just got my tripod set up to where I think it's supposed to be. Okay, so I'm going to get all of these finger tight. And while I'm doing this, the bottom head will be muffled. So what I'll do now is press in on it to give it a little bit of tension and do a little turn, about a quarter turn or so on each of these lugs in succession. Now I'll take my stick, and what I'm going to do is hit the head near each lug just to see if they sound the same. And if they don't, what I might end up hearing is kind of like a beat. Like when you hear two instruments and they're out of tune with each other, you'll hear you'll actually get that on the head as well. And sometimes if a head isn't tuned very well, you'll actually just hear it all together when you hit the top head. When you actually hit the tom, you'll hear it because they're two different frequencies or two different, they're just out enough to where they're clashing with each other. And actually, in a lot of professional, in a lot of professional videos, matter of fact, I just watched one earlier this morning. When the drummer finished playing his fill, I could hear the toms ringing, and I heard some doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo, so they weren't tuned perfectly. Now, granted, it's tough to get toms tuned perfectly. It's probably one of the hardest things in drumming. So let's check this out here. Okay, so I don't need to put any pressure on it. It's already tight enough. So I'm not hearing any beating with that one. But I am with that one. And I think overall it's just too loose, so I think I'm going to go ahead and give it another, maybe about 1/8 of a turn. That's changing it quite a bit. See, these are off by like a whole, this is like a half step right here, so I got to... Now I hear a little bit of a wave there. They're much closer now. The other thing you can do is if you hear the beat, you can take it and go up or down with it and see if you can eliminate the beats that way. That didn't help. I'm getting closer there. There we go. Yeah, so you can do that. Now, of course, that's just these two lugs. Now, of course, I got to go and deal with the other ones. Okay, so now I got to deal with that. Make sure I hit it the same way. we go, now it's going away. Now, part of the beating may be coming from some of the other lugs, so I'm going to get them a little bit closer first before I investigate the rest of it. There's still some beating going on. That one does. That one not so much. That one not so much. It's mainly this one right here that I'm getting some beating from. There we go. There we go. Now it's gone. So I got this one pretty much equal. Sometimes it's really hard to get rid of all of the beating, so if you only hear like a very little bit, it might be okay. Because if it's very apparent, then you want to try to get rid of it. So okay, so we've done that. I'm going to go ahead. Now this is very tight, so what's probably going to happen is I'm going to have it tuned, and then it's going to be higher than I want it. But you know what? That's just how it goes. Or I can do the thing I was talking about before and tune the bottom head, or tune the top head maybe just a little bit lower and see how that works. You know, I know there's a lot of, you know, standard rules and stuff when it comes to tuning drums, but, you know, somebody I worked with the other day mentioned that sometimes he actually asked me about how I tune drums, and I was explaining it. He said, "Well, it sounds like you tune drums almost like you cook steak. You know, you have to kind of feel it, you know, for each one in particular." And that's kind of how it is. It just depends on, you know, each particular, you know, situation. Okay, so this is flat but not wrinkled. I'm gonna do a quarter turn on each one. It doesn't take much on this guy. Do another one. Starting to get a little tight there. Okay. Whoa, that one's way out. Surrounding ones. See, I can hear there's a boom, boom, boom. I don't know if you can hear that through the phone speaker, but I'm kind of getting it there. So if the beats get slower, that means you're getting closer. If they get faster, that means that you're going further out. So right now I've got a do 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 kind of. just made it worse by doing it. Seems like going lower makes it a little bit better. So one of these was way off. So now I've got to be very careful because it seems like the slightest move is going to make these go out. And it doesn't help that this is going on with this. Let me pause this video and let me see if I can go find a better drum key. This one's a little bit worn out. Okay, this one's a little bit better, but you know, I probably should be using the key that I got with the kit because these tension rods here are, the size is different than the Masterworks. Not by much, but just enough to have this wiggle room here. So, let's see. Let's go about like that. I feel like I need my protractor here. Not that that would make it exactly right, but... Okay. Now let's see where we're at here. Pretty good. Now, so I've got that. Now what about here? So the bottom head is tuned higher than the top right now. Let's see what it sounds like right now. See, there's a little bit of decay, flat decay, but not very much. If I hit the bottom head, it kind of boom, 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 boom. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and stick with that. And just depending on what happens when I get everything set up, I may have to put some moon gels on it just to get it to not ring so much. Even though we're outside, but I'm going to be miking these toms. So I'll probably have to put a gel on them, just because it's a small band. It's not a big band, so there's not a whole lot going on. So the sound of everything needs to be a little bit more precise. So that's just generally how I do it. I would do the same thing. I'm going to do the same thing here with my floor tom, but this video is already pretty long, so I don't think that's necessary. So hopefully that'll work out, and hopefully it'll stay in tune because my gig is tomorrow. So anyway, I'll see you guys next time. Everyone take care.